Doors closing.
And now something completely different.
Happy Hour.
What's up? This is Happy Hour. I am your host, Ryan Hoppe, and I'm very excited about this next guest. On the phone line, I used to listen to this guy every time I visited North Carolina to see my family, and they would have him on in the morning. On the phone line is Jack Murphy. What's up, man?
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing good. This is very surreal. So my Nana, she passed away in 2006, but my Nana and my mom's side of the family lives in Winston-Salem. So we would visit twice a year, once during the summer and then during Thanksgiving. So I didn't get to hear you guys a lot when you guys were on Thanksgiving break, but I would listen to you guys and two guys named Chris during the summer when I would visit. And I always felt like Winston was my second home because I visited so much. So this is very surreal talking to you.
Well, thanks for inviting me. It's good to be with you. I've heard a lot about the podcast, and I'm excited to talk with you.
I appreciate that. So, how did you get into radio?
Well, it's a crazy story. When I was like 13, 14 years old, I had a friend. His dad was one of my teachers, and he went to a private school up the road in Rome, Georgia. And one of the things that he got to do at private school was he took Taekwondo karate classes. And so he had a job working at this in my hometown, Cedartown, Georgia. There was a little 1,000-watt daytimer, 250 at night. And he worked 6 p.m. to sign off at night when he was in high school. And so I would go up to the radio station to practice karate with him. And while he was doing his homework, he would get me to spin the records. And, within a couple of months, I was much more interested in spinning the records than I was the karate. So basically, he was getting paid and I was doing the work. And a couple of years later, he went away to college, and since I knew how to do everything, and I'd already gone and gotten back then, you had to have an FCC third-class license. I'd gotten my license. So when he left, I was in like 10th grade, I think, 9th or 10th grade. They hired me full-time. It was a great gig. I was making $90 a week, and that's how I got started.
So, did you go through different phases as a host, or were you sort of the same person? Because I've seen like what a lot of people on radio, like someone like, let's say Steve Dahl in Chicago in the 80s and 70s, he's pretty outrageous. And then come the 90s and present day, he's more laid back. Did you go through different eras as a host?
Oh, definitely. I mean, when you're younger, you're much more driven. You have a lot more energy. You don't, I wouldn't say don't care, but I really didn't care what people thought. I just wanted to do things that were fun. And, as you get a little bit older, you change. So yeah, you definitely go through progressions.
It's got to be pretty surreal, too, the talent tree that comes from your show. Katie, Jared, Chris, Kelly, Biggie. Is it sort of cool to look back on it and see the people that you grew in radio?
Well, I was very lucky. When I started doing morning radio in particular, I moved a lot because I always wanted to move and work with somebody that was better than me or knew more than me. And I would go work with them and, try to suck up all the knowledge that I could. And I think probably my greatest talent was not any talent I had on the air, but it was being able to spot people that I thought had talent or had a lot of potential talent to develop. And throughout the years, wherever I was, I like to think I found a lot of people and got them into the business. And I was just in Greensboro for so long that, I'd pluck people out of the intern program or the promotions department or wherever they happen to be if I thought they had talent. But yeah, there are a lot of people there at DBC that were interns for me at one time or the other.
How crazy is it seeing what Chris Kelly has become, knowing that he began on your show? Because he even admitted to me that he first saw you were kind of a hard ass and that you wanted a lot out of the show. But then he said on my show, once he began his own show, he totally saw what you were trying to do.
I mean, I'm not surprised at all at what Chris Kelly's done because, even way back then, I knew he had a lot of talent. And that's the biggest problem that you have with a lot of people that have talent, and not that he was, but a lot of them are lazy. They don't have a lot of ambition. They don't have a lot of drive, and I was very pushy and kind of a slave driver because I had a vision of what success looked like, and sometimes you had to drag them kicking and screaming along with you. But most of them got it once they saw some success. They went, "Oh, this is what you have to do to be successful." And so I'm not surprised at all at Chris's success.
It had to be crazy how popular you were in the Triad area. I mean, we would talk about your show like in the backyard when my cousins were drinking beer. They'd be like, "Oh, did you hear Murphy in the morning this morning? Or did you hear two guys named Chris?" I mean, was it kind of like unique in the moment knowing that like this was pre-social media too? This is 20, 25 years ago. And it has to be kind of weird to think that like what you were saying into a mic was what people were talking about even when the show was done. You know what I mean?
Well, not really, because I'd experienced that before at other places. I mean, I was at Z100 in New York for a couple of years when they were, at their most popular. So, I mean, I'll never forget this. I'd been at Z100 for about 2 weeks, and one morning they were talking about my car. And I drove into the city, and I'm on like Fifth Avenue, and a truck driver blows the horn at me, and I rolled down my window, and I went, "Yeah." And he goes, "Hey, are you Murph?" And I went, "Yeah." And I just thought, that's crazy. And I had the same experience in San Diego and to a lesser degree in Dallas. But no, I mean, when you work really hard at it, you prepare well every day, and you have good people around you. You expect to have success, and that. I mean, if you're honest, that's why you do it. It's a lot of it's ego,
So I've done a lot of interviews, and there's two major points that a lot of radio hosts say changed the business. They say it was the bill that Bill Clinton signed, and the other one is the Janet Jackson nipple. Did either of those things affect your show at all?
No, the nipple thing was just content. And are you talking about deregulation?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, deregulation was without a doubt the worst thing that ever happened to radio, and we see the results of it now. And I'm really upset and angered at some of the things that are going on. I mean, some of these companies that wound up with hundreds of stations were terribly ran. They paid way too that they paid 10, 15, 20 times cash flow in some cases. And then, you had a little recession, the revenue was off, and then they've got new competition from everywhere. and suddenly they're in big trouble. And that's why radio, I think I hate to say this, but it's pretty well dead, because it's like somebody in a coma and they're just waiting to pull the plug. I live in Charlotte, and with the exception of maybe one of the sports talk stations and maybe one news talk station, there just isn't anything happening on the radio that's really attractive to listen to, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, John Boy and Billy, who were syndicated on, I don't know how many, 70 stations. They're not even on their home station here in Charlotte anymore. The classic rock station that they were on for 25, 30 years. It's just nuts. And even more infuriating to me are these companies, they bought up these stations, and then they suddenly are losing money, and they fired everybody they can fire.
Oh, yeah.
And instead of the FCC making them spin them off to maybe a local group that could make a go of it, they're just letting them turn them off. They go dark. And they do that because they don't want any more competition, but they're really, taking the public airways away from the public.
You know what I think the other disappointing part about radio is the talent pool of like the farm system. So I've been in radio since 2012, right when I graduated high school. I've always wanted to do radio. And it seems like a lot of the early 2010s high school graduates, people my age that are in our early 30s, youngest being late 20s, the last 12, 13 years, there really hasn't been like a lot of jobs given out because they just keep putting in syndicated radio shows. And I know a lot of people that just gave up. I know people at my radio trade school. I know people at one of my jobs I was at for 7 years that they just were not willing to stick it out. And there was, it's paying off now, but there was some transition. I don't know if they were afraid to pay if a show were to work, but something happened. I think it might have been after 2008, but it just seemed like radio stopped growing talent because a lot of the radio shows, I mean, even two guys named Chris, they've been on since 1999, but there's really no like morning show that's out there that I can think of that's been around since like 2015. You know what I mean? It seems like podcasts sort of took away the spotlight of morning radio,
Well, you hit the date right on the head. That's right when it started getting really bad. I mean, it was bad before that, but that's when it got really bad. And I used to go up to Appalachian State every year.
Yeah.
Dan Valley's talent school up there. And there were people interested. But, I tell people now, because I feel like I was so lucky. My career was really in maybe not the golden age, but the almost golden radio, in that if you worked hard and you did well and you got rated, you got compensated really, really well. I mean, in some cases, stupidly well. And I love the money, and that's why I worked so hard, and I was able to provide well for my family. Now, I mean, these people are doing 5 different shows, on 5 different stations, and they're still not making any money. And so when people ask me, I say, if I were you, I would focus on doing a podcast or a YouTube video podcast or something else, because I think it's a dying medium. And you see it happening now too to local television. They've got the same problem.
Well, even in small markets, like I heard this in the news, in like let's say some podunk town in Indiana where you could go make your whatever little money you make, but get to be on TV. Like let's say Fort Wayne, Indiana, I believe is what the market was. Now they're just airing people from the Weather Channel.
Yeah, and they're getting rid of all the. It used to be like the most important person on the local TV station was the weather guy. And now they're firing all the weather guys.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I think drives me nuts about radio. I've had people go, oh, you should go to Chattanooga, or you should go to this town or this town and start a show. And I'm like, But the problem is either Elvis Duran, which I respect the hell out of Elvis Duran, but either Elvis Duran, Bobby Bones, The Woody Show, or The Breakfast Club is syndicated there. Brooke and Jeffrey, I believe it's what it's called. And that's cool. Like, that's awesome because those guys have worked really hard at getting into all the markets they're in. But at the same time, sometimes I look at radio and I'm like, wouldn't it be cool if you like grew your own show? But that's then them not wanting to pay. We saw it, man, during COVID, 2020, 2021, those layoffs. I remember their website, Radio Insight, it took 2 pages to see everybody that was laid off during COVID. And that, I think COVID is what officially killed radio.
Well, that was one of the probably 5 or 6 big things. But the other thing is, I think you could go to a lot of these markets if you had an independent owner. Number one, I think there's a lot of markets you could go to, and if you did the work and you prepped every day and you put some talented people around you, you could make a show work. But there just aren't any people interested in doing the work necessary. They don't see the life you have to live to do it. I mean, you're doing a show from 5:30 to 10, 6 to 10 or whatever, and then you're at the station every day till 2:00, and then you go home. And I did more work at home than I did at the station. And I had a voiceover business on top of that, which I still operate. But it's a life. It consumes your life. It's a lifestyle if you want to be successful at it. And most young people now, they're just not interested in putting in that kind of effort.
Well, because it's definitely a lifestyle change. I've noticed that where I was producing weekend programming at this big talk station in Tampa for about 6 years, in the 2010s through early 2020s. And somebody else was offered the gig, but they didn't want to give up their Friday and Saturday nights. And from age 24 till about 29, I never went. I couldn't go to concerts. I couldn't go to the bar. Girls would want to hang out with me. I literally, for those 6 years, Murphy, it was all about radio. And I don't really regret it. I cared a little bit too much about the job, but also I'm kind of a princess when it comes to my sleep. Like, if I don't get my sleep and I have to get up early, I will not be the same person if I get the 8 hours of sleep.
Sleep deprivation is part of doing a morning show, but I know what you mean. Like when I was 18 or 19, I had like 4 jobs. I was doing a morning show on a little station in Georgia, and then at night I went to Columbia School of Broadcasting and worked there. And then on the weekends I worked at WQXI AM, and on Thursday nights I spun records at the Mad Hatter at Underground Atlanta, and I still didn't make $300 a week. But I loved it, and I didn't care. I just wanted to. That's what I wanted to do.
I think my favorite part about your show was the fact that you guys didn't do like War of the Roses and that. I've always had an appreciation for like a top 40 morning show or even any format, but I like the ones that have the original content. I don't want to hear something on a morning show that I can hear 2 markets like down the block. You know what I mean? So many of the morning shows rely on second date update and that.
It's funny that you should mention that because I always hated that bit. And yet our consultants and our program directors insisted that we do it. And, I would do it. I hated them every single time. I hated it. They're just so fake. Even when you had really good actors, they were, they just, to me, it was, you could see right through it. And but they insisted that we do it, and we did it, and then I would stop doing it, and then they would say, hey, I haven't heard you do a War of the Roses lately. Let's do that. I would go, because I hate it. I don't want to do it.
I got in so much trouble when I said on my show 2 years ago, Murphy, that it wasn't real. at the company I was working at that loved radio, they called me into the office. And it's like, but if you're putting it out there, it's going to get criticized, but I see how they were mad because it's like it blows their cover.
Well, yeah, people here in Charlotte are still doing them, and the minute they start, I can't take it. But listeners are smarter than you give them credit for, because
I said that, yeah.
Whenever that was set up well, written well, executed well, everybody knew it was a bit, right? But they didn't care because it was funny. The War of the Roses calls, they're never funny. They're just uncomfortable.
It's perfect.
I never cared that much for uncomfortable radio. I like funny, and when you're trying to do that, sometimes you're not funny because it's not going to be funny all the time.
My biggest pet peeve in radio, I think even more than War of the Roses, because I get how it works. It's kind of like watching The Bachelor. It's kind of that. But what drives me nuts in radio,
I hate Bachelor, The Golden Bachelor. I hate all those shows.
But it's kind of the same thing, like wanting it to be real. But you know what drives me nuts? I use one of the prep services for like stuff on my show, but I give the prep service credit and I say this is from Wise Brother Media. I can't stand, because I'll listen to other shows and I'll hear the same prep that I used on my show. I'll hear it on other shows, and I can't stand when they make it seem like they're the ones that got it. Like whenever I play the clip, I'm like, oh, I got this from Wise Brother. But I can't stand when people play like a bit that's provided from one of the services and then they act like they created it. It's just a very it's a little passive aggressive, like you don't want to give a shout out to somebody. But I know it's a very petty thing to be annoyed by, but I'll just hear some shows, Murphy, and I'm like, you're going to really act like you made that?
Yeah. And I'll tell you the other thing that I found that over the years a lot of people are unwilling to do. And, besides having the drive and the desire and the work ethic and all that, I think the most important thing that a morning person has to be willing to do is to be honest and really dig into your personal life, into uncomfortable areas, and have fun with it. And the people around you have to be willing to do that as well. And the more you're willing to expose them and yourself, I think the more the audience appreciates you and relates to your show, because you become more real. And some people, they just don't want to talk. I mean, I've worked places where you maybe be working with a new woman on the show or whatever, and a couple of weeks into it, go, hey, well, what's your dating life like? What are you doing? And they would look at you like you just stabbed them in the back, and and then the mic would turn off, and they go, I don't talk about that on the air. And I go, well, I think you're in the wrong place.
I had a female co-host who we were doing great things. But on the show, Murphy, she talked about how she had a vibrator named Jose that she bought, and how whenever she was laying by herself in bed, she would hit up Jose, and it was our whole bit. She didn't realize that people like listen to our show. Like she just didn't think about it. So she was at her parent-teacher conference, and the teacher and then one of the kids' mom went, "Where's Jose?" And then after that, she kind of didn't do the show again. And I was like, really, like some of them, I get how they want to put out the feminist energy, but it's like also like dating, sex, that's a part of life. Like there's like kind of a happy medium.
Yeah, I mean that would probably that's too much if you ask me. But I just think the more honest you are, the more successful you're going to be. If you can tell a good story, you have to be a good storyteller. I mean, if you've got something in your personal life that's really interesting, but you don't know how to tell the story, that doesn't work either. But if you can halfway tell a story, that's the best radio.
So throughout from 2006 to 2012, I would, if I was in a computer lab in high school or middle school, I would not do any work and I would listen to either you guys, two guys named Chris, or Opie and Anthony, or shows in Chicago, and I would literally not do work, but just listen to you guys. And I believe I was listening to your last show you did on 107.5 because I remember I was following. I've always just had such a thing for the Triad area, and I was following one of the local news on Twitter that day, and it said that you were off the air. What was your last show on KZL like? Do you remember it?
Do I remember the show? Not really. I mean, it was just a regular show, and then, I was fired right after that.
Yeah, I've been fired a few times, and there's that weird feeling. I don't know if you had it, where you're driving home and you go, "It's over." It's the weirdest feeling. It's the strangest thing.
I got fired. I mean, look, I did this for 40 something years, so I got fired a few times. And, sometimes it was a format change. Sometimes the station was sold. Maybe sometimes you were making too much money. A lot of different reasons. But in this particular case, it was the best thing that happened to me, really, in retrospect, because I had outgrown the format, probably 10 years before. I hated the music that we played. I didn't identify with any of the artists. So as a result, I really didn't play any music. And, there was a big age gap between me and the people that I was working with. And there was probably a lot of resentment there. But I didn't realize all the pressure and weight that I was carrying around. You had all these salespeople that depended on you for ratings, and we were delivering ratings, but the economy was so bad they couldn't sell. They were having difficulty selling, and there was a lot of paranoia. It was just an uncomfortable place.
Yeah,
the
last few years, yeah.
And so, for me, I was real lucky because I'd had this voiceover business for 30 years. And it's always done pretty well. And I said, you know what, I'm just going to focus on that. And then I got lured back into radio for a minute, and I went out to San Diego, and that was a terrible decision because the terrible company, the signal was terrible. They were underfunded. It was just a nightmare. I knew within a month that it wasn't going to last very long. And so I came back to North Carolina and now just do voiceover work, and I'm perfectly happy doing that.
Is there any part of you that misses having a morning show?
I probably 10 years ago would have said yes, but today, no. I don't miss getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning. I sleep 8 hours like a baby every night. I spend a lot of time on my health. I hike about 5 miles every day. I work out a lot. I'm in physically better shape than I've been in a long time, and I've always been kind of a gym rat. But no, I don't. I don't miss the business. I don't miss the sales managers, GMs, the horrible rating services. I don't miss the complaints. I don't miss any of that.
What type of prep did you do? So what I mean by that is I've worked on many shows, and some of them get there right at like 5:55 a.m. and they begin at 6, and they kind of just free will it. And some shows I have to get there when I've worked with them at 4:30 a.m. to import audio and to record audio off of TMZ. When you were doing Murphy in the Morning or your San Diego show, like, what time were you getting to work, and how much prep were you doing before the mic went on?
I mean, if somebody's showing up at 10 till 6, and freewheeling it, and they're doing well. They're a lot more talented than I was. I always try to get to the station at 4:30, and then go and get as much done after the show as you could. I mean, sometimes you might leave at noon, 1, 2, whatever it took, and then I would do 2 or 3 more hours at home for the show. I'll tell you one story about how I became a morning person, how I got material. It's stuff crazy. So I was a program director for Cox Communications. I'd been in Atlanta at WABFM. I was the music, and they wanted to flip their station in Philly, which was a beautiful music station, with this soft hits format and they wanted me to go up and be the program director. So I said, okay. So I was doing afternoon, and we had a new general manager, a guy named Bill Fitch, passed away some years ago. But Bill said, we got to get a morning show. And I think I was making like 45, 50 grand a year program director and doing afternoon. That was good money, back in the early 80s. And he said, you got to hire a morning show. And I said, well, how much do you pay? And he goes, well, it's right. We pay just about anything. I pay $300,000. Well, he peed my pants when I had that. So I called up the guy that I thought was the best morning guy in town, a guy named Harvey. It was Matt Radio, and he agreed to have lunch with me. And I just, I didn't beat around the bush at all. I said, hey, I'm the program director. We need a morning show. I've listened to all the shows. I think you're by far the best guy in town. I have no idea what you're making, but I'll pay you $300 grand a year. And this guy was kind of a hippie. He said, he said, I'm not making near that much money, but I'm not sure what my audience would think about that if I just went across the street for more money. And I said, who the hell cares if if you get to do what you're doing now and you make the money? Anyway, he didn't take the job, so I had to find a morning show. So I put, back then we had all the trade magazines, right? So I put a blind box ad in all the big trade magazines. It said something like top 5 market, morning show wanted, only the best need apply, money is no object, blah, 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 and had an address. And within just a few days, man, these tapes started coming in from all over the country from really, really good morning shows. And so I started listening to these tapes, and I got enthralled with it. And I started, the more I listened, the more I knew that's what I wanted to do, because as I listened, I could see kind of how their minds were working. I would listen to the bits they were doing and how they kind of developed them from a news story or something. And I said, I think with a little practice, I could do it. So I went into the GM and I said, Bill, I said, listen, I'm going to save you a lot of money. I said, I think you should let me do the morning show. I think I can do it. And you don't have to pay me $300,000 a year. I'll do it for like 80. And just give me a little time and I can make it work. And Bill fired me on the spot. He literally wrote a check and told me to leave.
Oh, wow.
So Charles Giddens, who used to be the GM at WPGC in Washington, Scott Shannon, he called me up and asked me to come to the station that he was moving into Atlanta from Gainesville. And so here's what I did. I went to Radio Shack and I bought, they used to sell cases of 120-minute cassette tapes, right? They had 120 minutes on each side. So I put ads in newspapers in Chicago, New York, LA, Dallas, maybe Miami. And the ad said, make money listening to the radio. And I had a phone number for them to call. And so people would call and I would pick somebody. Usually it was somebody that was homebound for whatever reason. And I would send them a case of these cassette tapes. And I said, all you have to have is a radio with a cassette recorder. And I want you to record this station every morning from 7 to 9. and I would send them self-addressed stamped envelopes back to them. So within a couple of weeks of making the deal with them, and I paid them $5 a tape, I started getting tapes of the best morning shows in America sent to my house. And of course, there was no internet back then. That was the only way to listen. And so I would listen to these tapes, and I would steal bits, I would copy bits, but it was a great way to train myself to think creatively. And that's how I got started doing it, and that's how I learned to do bits. Was listening to these other great morning guys do it. And the funny thing was Bill Phippen, the guy that fired me about 10 years later when I was in San Diego, he called me up, and he was the GM at Power 99 in Atlanta. He called me up and apologized and said, how wrong he was, blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, thank you. I appreciate it. And he goes, and I'd like for you to come to Atlanta to work at Power. And I said, no, I don't think I want to do that. But
now, before I let you go, would I be able to get you to record a liner for me?
Sure.
It would be, hey, this is Jack Murphy, and you're listening to Hoppe Hour with Ryan Hoppe.
Hey, it's Jack Murphy, and you're listening to the Hoppe Hour.
Awesome, bro. I appreciate that. Now, before I let you go, first of all, I just want to say this has been super surreal because I don't want to kiss your ass too much, but between sixth grade to high school, I listened to you guys every morning. You guys used to post clips online. I would save the MP3. Unfortunately, my computer crashed, so I lost all the files, but I had all these files of all these shows I liked on my computer. So this has just been very surreal, Jack. I appreciate it, man.
Oh, well, you're welcome, and continued success with your podcast.
If anybody wants to have you do voiceover, how can they get into contact with you?
Well, most of my business these days is by word of mouth. I mean, I do a lot of different kind of voiceover. I do commercial work. I do some narration work, and right now I've got about 22, 23 stations I work with, and most of it's by word of mouth. But they can email me, voiceguy@outlook.com.
Well, Jack Murphy, I appreciate you calling into Hoppe Hour. This has been an absolute blast, and I would love to do it again sometime.
All right, my friend. Good luck, and have a great weekend.
You too. Thank you, Murphy.
Bye-bye.
And that was Jack Murphy as he called into Hoppe Hour. Now, if this is your first time hearing my voice, hi. My name is Ryan Hoppe, and I am the host of this award-winning show. It's a morning radio show in a podcast format. So this week I interviewed Jack Murphy, and last week I interviewed Chris Dam and Chris Kelly from the Two Guys Named Chris show. But I have two versions. I have kind of an edgy morning show where I talk about celebrity news and rant. Then I have this version where I interview radio hosts. Go to every single major platform that has a podcast and search up Hoppe Radio, Hoppe Radio, to listen to Hoppe Hour. And by the way, insert Winston-Salem listener here. I love Haynes Mall, and I love the Village Tavern. They have the best steak.
TikTok, clocks a juke, we're playing cruel pranks. Hoppe's hour almost done. Feels like robbery in banks. Ryan Hoppe on the mic, dropping wisdom in streams. Syndicated sorrow, now it's time to shatter dreams. Oh, the Hoppe hour is coming to a close. Radio waves fading like a wilting rose. Laughter and joy dissolving in the air, but we'll keep the rhythm. Oh, life's just so unfair. But the laughter's growing dim. Eardrums mixing Hoppe like fingers without rings. DHX to FM, shout out hit the street. But soon the sound will vanish like shadows in the heat. Oh, the Hoppe hour is coming to a close. Radio waves fading like a wilting rose. Laughter and joy dissolving in the air, but we'll keep the rhythm. Oh, life's just so unfair. Phone lines buzzing, but the laughter's growing dim. Drums mixing Hoppe like fingers without rings. DHX to FM, shout outs hit the street. But soon the sound will vanish like shadows in the heat. Oh, the Hoppe hour is coming to a close. Radio waves fading like a wilting rose. Laughter and joy dissolving in the air, but we'll keep the rhythm. Oh, life's just so unfair. show. Now it's time to face the silence like the TV on snow. Riot Hoppe held the mic with humor so divine. The void left in our hearts wider than a canyon line. Empty speakers, silent vibe, but coming to an end like a roller coaster stopping round the river's bend. Hoppe's jokes and jabs, these our daily grind. Now silence louder than the thoughts we can't rewind. Oh, the Hoppe hour is coming to a close. Radio waves fading like a wilting rose. Laughter and joy dissolving in the air, but we'll keep the rhythm. Oh, life's just so unfair. The Hoppe hour is coming to a close. Radio waves fading like a wilting rose. Laughter and joy dissolving in the air, but we'll keep the rhythm. Oh, life's just so unfair.
Hoppe hour. Hoppe hour.
RyanHoppeRadio.com.
And like that, he's gone.
Hoppe hour is now over.
Hoppe hour is now over.
Game over.
This concludes our broadcast day. Good night, and God bless America.
Doors closing.